All right, what's up, guys? It's Lord Cycle. I'm here with Justin, and we're gonna do a part two Q&A. So, how you been doing, Justin? What have you been getting into magically and physically?
I've been good, man. Been staying busy. Magically, I've been working with the Qlippoth and doing a third set of attunements, which we can get into. Physically, I've been just doing school. I just started school like 2 months ago for kinesiology, which is the study of like the mechanics of the body. So I could be like a physical therapist. I'm already sort of a spiritual consultant as it is. So now I'm studying the physicality of our being so that I can help people in more ways than just one, like sort of linking the mind and the body and stuff. So I've been busy with school, I've been busy with clients, and just busy with path working and meditation and stuff. What
So,
about you?
lately I've been working with goetic spirits and
Mm.
angels, and physically just been working, um getting pretty stable, getting more and more successful.
That's good. So have you learned any like new techniques that have been helping with that, or have you just been spending more time and like being more focused about it?
Um, it's a lot of things, just life lessons pretty much that magic helps with for sure.
Mm.
And as well as adapting to your circumstances as you learn shit.
Yeah, that's a big part of it for sure. Learning how to make it work for you.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so talk to us more about the clip off,
Okay, yeah. So just in general, or what I've specifically been doing?
what you've been doing, and describe to us what a goetic pathworking is, maybe a book you refer to a lot or things like that.
Okay, so for me, I've got this like I'm pretty into herbalism and stuff because I like using plants for magical properties, but I also make my own incense as well. So anytime I go to do like a path working in a specific clippa, like I have this specific incense that I use that I mean I've got a list that I can read off, but it's like 12 different things that most people probably never even heard of. Um and like I've been taking some mushrooms when I do that too. I've got some golden teachers and some MVP. So like I'll usually go back and forth between like periods of taking mushrooms and like going sober just to see like how that affects. And for me, when I'm doing the path working, it's a lot about the correspondences. The way that I connect with a certain sphere is by studying the tarot card that has to do with that sphere, or the four, because there's four that deal with each one. Studying the colors, studying the deities, studying the different stones and minerals, and doing that allows me to connect more with the energy of the sphere. Like when you tie all of those correspondences together, you sort of get to the heart of the matter, so to speak. And so for me, what I'll do is I'll spend like a week in each sphere. But before I even do that, I'll just take like 3 hours or so to memorize all of the sacred names, memorize all of the deities, to memorize all of the correspondences, and like sort of like lock in to that frequency. And then for me, it's a lot about visual meditation and just becoming aware of the sensations that happen throughout my body. I keep my phone like my voice recorder. Like I just turn my voice recorder on and I'll just describe what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what I'm feeling. And then later on, like I'll journal my experiences down in a more concrete way so that I can go back at a later date and sort of find commonalities. Because like I said, I'm going through my third series right now, and it's crazy how many like correlations there are between like my first time through and like going through my third time now. Like I'm in Satariel right now. I'm in my uh like the seventh day of Satariel right now, so I'm going to be going into Gogiel next. But just looking back, it's like, man, like it's crazy how many. It's like it's just so cyclical. Like the same things happen in my life. People start talking about the same things that they did, like last year. Like so, like for me, it's very experiential. Like it's not just like a lot of people when they do the path working in the Qlippoth, like their only experience with it is the dreams that they have. But for me, it's way more than that. Like it's very visual, it's very sensational, it's very auditory. Books that I would recommend for that, if you're just starting out on the left hand path, like it's not exactly practical in the sense of path working, but start with Lords of the Left Hand Path by Stephen Flowers, and it'll give you a great foundation for the history of the relationship between all of the left hand entities. And once you find your way through Lords of the Left Hand Path by Stephen Flowers, I would recommend a book called Kabbalah, Qlippoth, and Goetic Magic by Thomas Carlson. That is essential. If you're going to be working with the left hand path, like you should read that book, and you should probably read it more than once. Take notes while you're reading it, because you're going to go back and read it a second time and you're going to find new things. And if you don't have enough by the time you finish that, then maybe people are going to hate me for saying this, but also read The Night Side of Eden by Kenneth Grant. Some people don't like that book for whatever reason, but I found it to be really useful. It gives actual it gives you the means to actually path work through not just the Qlippothic spheres, but the tunnels of Set, or the caverns of Karanzin, as they're also known. And make sure that you're taking notes when you do that, because a lot of this is going to be unconscious work, and you're not even going to realize what happened until you go back and look at your notes and you're like, oh shit, that was probably from this working or that one.
Damn, that sounds interesting. But
Sorry, that's too much information.
no, it's not. I think people shouldn't hate the Night Side of Eden book, because every person that is experienced with the Qlippoth that I've looked into, they recommend that book.
Yeah, it's gold, man, for real.
Mhm. For sure. Um, Describe to us maybe a little bit more of the specifics of the Qlippoth, like what somebody might experience in certain spheres.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So, in my experience, if you're working through like Lilith, like the actual sphere of Lilith, not the entity, because the entity that deals with Lilith is called Nahima or Nahima, or some people say Nama, but I say Nahima. So if you're working through the sphere of Lilith, like you might become kind of materialistic, and you might like start like seeking validation from people. And it's good to know this stuff, because people end up in the Qlippoth without even realizing it all the time. So if you're working through Lilith, like you might be, materialistic or whatever. The next one is Gamaliel. You might be like more prone towards sexuality and lust and stuff, because that's the adverse of the sphere of Yesod, which lines up with the procreative organs. If somebody is working through a Rob Zarok, they might be dealing with drug addiction, or um, worrying too much about the sensational part of life. If somebody's working through Samael, they might be obsessive over something. Their mind might have the best of them. Um, they might be neurotic, and too concerned with, the analytical side of things. If you're working through the Girion, which is, the adverse of Tiferet, um, you might, that one's tough, because that one's a little bit more personal. But for me, it has to do with being controlling and like trying to balance things out in your own way, and not letting like nature take its course, so to speak. I can keep going, but if that's kind of just the general overview that you wanted, I don't want to just sit here and steamroll the
Yeah, that
conversation.
was a good general overview.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
so let's say a person has a drug problem or whatever, and you said
Mm-hmm.
a certain sphere that has to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is it common for people to maybe focus on one that they have the problem with, or should you work on all of them equal days always?
So that's a really good question. The way that I would handle that is to work in the light side of that sphere first, and
Mhm.
then go down to that sphere on the other side in the Citra and sort of figure out what's going on there. You might have dreams that tell you the root of why are you addicted to drugs? You might have a dream about something that's like, oh shit, like that's something that happened in my past that I'm trying to dissociate from. Um, I do recommend balancing out the tree, but one if you have one sphere in your psyche or your soul or whatever that is really imbalanced, it may prevent you from being able to clear out the other ones. It's like a blocked chakra. Like if anahata is blocked and you're not in tune with your own inner balance, you go up and you try to unblock Vishuddha, you might not get as much out of it as you would have. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, do you recommend focusing on it extra or no?
It depends. It depends what you mean by extra.
I know
I
you
would
said the
just,
light side, but like, would you work on it longer amounts of time than the other ones?
yeah. So, like I said, I normally spend a week in each sphere
Okay.
whenever I'm going through. So, like my routine, I just go up and down the tree nonstop. I work with the Sephi Road in the spring. I work with the Nabitoth or, the positive paths in the summer. And then in the fall, I work with generally we'll work with the Qlippoth. And then in the winter, like I'll work through the tunnels of Set. But the way that that works is it doesn't line up with the year perfectly. So I'm actually in the Qlippoth right now, even though it's spring. And that was a personal decision for me because I needed extra work, like you're talking about.
Oh,
The
okay.
more the more you unveil within the shadow, like the more there is. So like instead of spending a week in a sphere, if I'm having a problem there, I'll spend a whole fucking month there.
Okay. That's interesting to know. So you look at it as more of like, if I need to spend more time in the clip off, I'll do that. Or if I need to spend more time in the tunnels of set, I'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So describe to us the tunnels of set.
So any better than I can describe. I'll give some insight that I have personally, but what some people might find more utility in is studying the light side because the dark side is just it's a reflection of the light side. So like if you're working through like the Antifaxith or something, which is like the 32nd, it's the one that connects Lilith to Gamaliel. Um, like that's going to be like you could almost turn the tarot card upside down and meditate on that. Like whatever tarot card deals with the path and the Etz Chodesh or the holy tree, you could almost reverse the tarot card and use that as a focus for meditation and sort of bring those energies into your life. The all of the paths are entirely subjective. So they're going to be different for everybody. The experience is going to be similar, but the way that it manifests in your life is going to be different. The images you're going to get are going to be personal symbolisms, whereas if you're working with a specific klippa, like that's going to be something objective. Like everybody has the same experience in Golakab, anger issues. Like people lose their shit in Golakab because it's the adverse fiery Mars Gavura energy, basically. So, speaking about the tunnels of Set, it's been very personal. I've uncovered some really dark things about my past that I completely forgot about because I had just sort of like blocked them out. You know what I mean? So if you're working through the tunnels, like it's like a fucking plunger for your soul. Like you're probably gonna uncover some dark things, and that might be dark things that other people did to you. It might be dark things that you did to other people. It might be things that you thought, I would never do anything like that, but you start imagining yourself doing those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So would you consider the tunnels of Set like a second night side, or would you consider it darker or like an in between of the light and night?
I think it's darker. I think like I think that the tunnels are much darker. Like especially depending on your past. For me, the Qlippoth are just sort of like, like okay, that was a little bit rough, but like the tunnels, like sometimes I have to spend a lot of time in a specific tunnel. Like I'm working through Thantafaxeth again right now, and I've been in there for um I don't know, like maybe 3 weeks. And something that I do that I wouldn't recommend other people do is like I'll work in a specific sphere and a certain tunnel, sometimes at the same time, if I'm noticing that there's a connection between them.
Mm.
And I will try to draw commonalities across them to try to extract some greater truth that I need to work through. But that's more advanced, I think. It's
Yeah, it's
kind of like
definitely
listening to two
advanced.
songs at once.
I wouldn't I wouldn't recommend that for beginners because they might take it out of hand and
Yeah.
start working on a bunch. But for the advanced, definitely.
Hmm.
Um, so does the tunnels of Set have to do with any Egyptian deities, or is it goetic spirits, or what is it?
Not in my experience. I think that people on the left hand path have a proclivity to go back to antiquity because the left hand path is somewhat rebellious. And when you're rebelling, you're also going to rebel against the current paradigm, the current times. And what that does is it causes the pendulum to swing away from like Christianity into like its predecessors, like, Egyptian Cometian mythology. And I think that the Egyptians had a better grasp of the shadow and the shadow realm, so their god forms and their deities are just more congruent with those energies in general. I don't think that they're specifically Cometian or Egyptian or Sumerian. I just think that people back then had a greater sense of adversity in their life, so they just had a better way to project the experience of it, and they had a better way to encapsulate that energy in god forms, if that makes sense.
But when you look into, let's say, a path working book of the tunnels of Set, does
Mhm.
it include does it include any deities or
Okay, yeah, yeah. Then in that case, yeah, they you can use those images to path work through to project that feeling into your psyche. Yeah, I misunderstood what you were asking.
what type of spirits are associated with the tunnels of Set?
There are actual, like, it's genie in a lot of
Oh, okay.
traditions. Like it's actual Djinn or genie. Um, I don't have a list of names on me right now. I'm like I said earlier, my memory has been terrible lately
Okay.
due to medical things. So I have to fucking write everything down. But yeah, Crowley actually covered a lot of this and has like Liber Carcerum something something. And there's actual like glyphs and sigils that you can use. Lon Milo Duquette's Tarot of Ceremonial Magic actually has on a lot of the cards the sigils and the genie that relate to those paths.
That's
Like Improteus and Thantafaksath and Shakshak Salim, and like all of these names are very Arabic or Sumerian sounding. I think of them as genie. I think a lot of people do.
that's cool. And talk to us more about genies or Jinn. Have you worked with them, and I've read a little something that they're fire and earth spirits, right? Or no?
That's been my experience. Yeah, they're very fiery and they're very earthy. One of my partners works a lot more with the Djinn than I do. I've done a few conjurations of like specific Djinn, other than like and Proteus and all of the tunnels of Set Djinn. But as far as specific Djinn, like Arabic, like Djinn go, I don't have a lot of experience with those. I've conjured a few of them for like I don't know, for clients for like material gain. Like some of my clients are like completely averse to angels or demons, but they want to work with the Djinn. So I'll spend like a week or so like studying that and getting into the mindset of that for the specific client. But as far as as far as my experience goes, they're super chaotic, man. Like they'll even shift forms while I'm talking to them. Like they're trying to get me to lose my focus almost. Like that old adage of the genie in the bottle and like be careful what you wish for has definitely been my experience. You really have to bind them down with statements of intent. Or things can go sour.
To me, that doesn't make sense for somebody to request them and not the other ones.
Well, people, the Abrahamic religions have done a number on a lot of people. They're just completely against. I don't want any angels. I don't want any demons. It's like, do you know what you're getting into? They're like, yeah, I've been reading about this. I'm like, we'll see.
um, so how would you work with them and like what are some tips? Like I would imagine like they are not for invocation or
I've never invoked a Jinn.
yeah.
It's always been an evocation. And what I like to do, they say find dirty places. So most people go into the bathroom when they work with the Jinn, but that's not what I do. I normally either go out into my backyard at night because there's a lot of like wild animals and stuff where I live. I live out in the middle of nowhere. So like I'll go outside and I'll just like go into trance, like listening to the sound of the crickets or the cicadas, and then I will light some incense and I'll have like a lot of people don't give offerings to the Jinn. I do. I do it out of respect. So I'll light my incense, I'll go into trance. Sometimes I'll play music, like I'll bring my didgeridoo or I'll bring my mouth harp or I'll bring um some like my singing bowl or something, and I'll do something as like a way to get into trance. And usually what happens is the song will change. Like I'll be playing one rhythm over and over and over, and then all of a sudden the song will change. um just out of nowhere, just sporadically. And that's how I know when they're there, or that's how I know when they're ready to make the connection. And then I will do there's usually some form of conjuration or incantation that you'll read over and over and over. And then there'll be like a shift in the wind, or like a bird will like make a fucking crazy noise or whatever. And it's like, okay, like it's time. And then you conjure them forth and you give them your charge, or the statement of intent. And then usually what happens is like my heart will start palpitating, or like will speed up, or it'll feel like I've got like sand in my blood. I don't know how to explain it. It just feels like there's sand in my blood. And then I'll give the charge, and then I'll give the statement of release. And then it's like somebody takes a blanket off of me or something. Like the pressure in the air changes when they're there and when they leave.
Hmm. And the change in wind, I've
Mhm.
experienced that with angels
That makes sense.
because angels are air spirits, right?
Yeah, that's been my experience. Yeah, a lot of people break it down into two categories, Oronic and Chthonic, which are like Empyrean or heavenly spirits, and like infernal or like lower spirits. But I think any spirit can cause harm or positive change. Like it just depends on, I don't know, astrological alignments. It depends on your affinity for the specific spirit. But yeah, the angels to me are like when, and that's what I was talking about earlier when we were talking, is like a lot of these spirits seem very elemental to me.
For sure. And so with the Jinn and the tunnels of Set,
Mhm.
um, how we talked about earlier before this call, how angels you kind of have to change your character a little bit. Do you have to do that with while working with Jinn or no?
Not in my experience. It tends to be that the offering and the fact that you had the gumption and guile to conjure them forth in the first place sort of makes them see you as an equal, and they sort of get something out of it as well. I don't know if there's like an energy exchange that happens, like if I'm going to like bring somebody wealth and I conjure like a Jinn for that, like I don't know if there's some form of astral etheric wealth that they also draw from that physical, currency, but they don't seem, yeah.
It feels like that a little bit with demons.
Yeah, it does.
Like
Mhm.
they like that they tag along for the journey.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um let's see. What spirits, obviously when you're working with this stuff, the primary focus is not just to be materialistic, but what spirits have you worked with that have been good for money?
um so for money, I normally don't use goetic spirits for money. I'll normally work with like the gnomes. If I'm trying to bring somebody money, like I'll work with earth spirits like Jinn or gnomes. If I'm trying to bring somebody money, for me, the goetic spirits have been best for like philosophical, like learning a subject faster, or changing somebody's opinion about something, or um, like to some extent, like I've said before, like I've used them for healing and stuff, but to me healing is a very largely psychological and etheric thing. So for me the spirits are um more of like a, like they work on a spiritual level. It's hard to explain, but you can use them for like healing people and causing diseases, or like you could use Andromalius for like returning stolen goods. That's someone that I've been working with right now for a client, is Andromalius.
Is it
um
Alicia?
Yeah, he's the 72nd spirit.
Okay.
Yeah. They always say to start with Aurobus or Andromalius because they're the most friendly towards the magician.
I've heard that with Bune or Boone.
Boone, yeah. Yeah. Vine or Vine and Bune or
Yeah, that
Boone.
was good.
I've heard those are both pretty nice spirits. I actually have not worked with all 72 spirits. As long as I've been doing this, I just haven't had a need to. Like I'm really short on time when it comes to experimentation. So like for me to just set aside the time to conjure all spirits just to have conjured all of them isn't really something that I would do. But there's 10 spirits that I work with like regularly, and there's like four spirits that I keep around me like at all times, if that makes sense. So for me, my experience working with those 10 spirits has been enough that I haven't needed to really go out. Like I've evoked several spirits, like I've probably conjured maybe 25 or 30 of the goetic spirits, but there's only 10 that I work with regularly. You know what I mean?
And so talk to us about gnomes. That's interesting subject that I haven't looked into at all. But
Okay.
talk to us about them.
So the gnomes are the earth elementals. So just real quick, the earth elementals are the gnomes, the air elementals are the sylphs, the water elementals are the undines, and the fire elementals are the Jinn. Or not the Jinn, sorry, the salamanders. The king of the salamanders name is Jinn. That's why I said that. So all the elementals have something called an elemental king. In some traditions, there's a king and a queen, depending, because like fire is a masculine, so like it has a king. Water is feminine and receptive, so it has a queen in some traditions. So the gnomes I use specifically for healing and like resources, like material gain and stuff like that. And so what I'll do is like I'll do a conjuration of Gob, who's the king of the gnomes. And they're kind of funny, man. Like they joke around and shit and like they'll play pranks on me. Like I straight up had this giant fucking stone. It was an amethyst. It's like not giant, but it wasn't like a pocket stone. And it just straight went missing. Like it was sitting in the same place on my table for months. And then I worked with the gnomes and my amethyst just disappeared like for a long time. And I actually had to work with Visago to bring that amethyst back. And I found it underneath my chair. So like the gnomes will like play tricks on you and stuff. But just friendly ones, like just to let you know that they're there and to let you know that they're quote unquote real. And I don't know, maybe we had a slight earthquake and it rolled off the table under my chair. But like to me, that's something that like gnomes are capable of, is like causing earthquakes and shit like that.
That's crazy. So these spirits is what you were referring to when you said elementals, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um, that would be under kind of Wicca or like pagan.
Yeah, it's more of a pagan aspect take on things.
Okay, okay. It sounds interesting though. But talk to us more about the elementals. Like
Okay, so yeah, there's this like 10-year system that I've sort of been developing that I have based on my own experiences as a practitioner over the last, I don't know, couple decades. Um, and what I recommend doing first before somebody even gets into um, like Goetia or Shem is to work with the elementals first.
okay.
Like actually spend 3 months with the like invoking like the elemental king or queen that relates to that season and learn what that element feels like, because in a lot of traditions everything is comprised by the elements. Like the planets are combinations of elemental energy. The zodiac are combinations of elemental energy. The Sephiroth, the Qlippoth, they're all combinations of elemental energy. So if you can actually integrate and balance those energies within yourself first, you're going to have a much better time working with the more advanced forces. So you might this is non-traditional. Most people equate the spring to fire, but I equate the spring to air because the first movement from winter, air represents movement. There's the scent of the flowers and the trees and everything is very windy to me. So in the spring, I would recommend somebody spend 3 months working with the sylphs and invoking Peralda, who is the king of the air spirits, and like actually give them an offering. I don't like whether it's incense or an apple or whether you write a fucking song for them,
Air.
whatever.
If it's air,
Um,
what do you think about smoking?
yeah, you could smoke. And you could what you could do is like get some bud or get some fucking salvia or something. Um, and like actually evoke Peralda or some other, air spirit that you're comfortable with, and, have them pass some of their energy, like have them charge that herb, and then invoke that current into yourself by, smoking some bud or something. And that will actually have an integratory effect. So yeah, spend 3 months if you're like a beginner, like if you're like a muggle or a baby witch or whatever they're fucking saying these days, start with the elementals, because everything is comprised of elemental energy anyway, in my experience. So yeah, work with air. I work with air in the spring, I work with fire in the summer, I work with water in the fall, and I work with earth in the winter time.
Sounds interesting. Um, it sounds interesting enough too that I would maybe even work with it. It sounds like it can help you grow, but also kind of safe. I kind
Yeah.
of worked backwards. I started with Lucifer and then
You
angel
just dove
like
into the
Lucifer.
deep end, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sounds interesting. What are I know you mentioned a king, but
Mhm.
describe to us some of the other spirits and some of your profound experiences with them.
Okay, yeah. So like I said, God stole my amethyst for a long time, and I had to actually use another spirit to get it back. Um, so I experienced them almost like fae. They're almost like fairies in a sense. Like they're kind of mischievous. They're kind of like they're kind of tricky, but at the same time they're very like they just have a really close place to my heart. I don't know how to explain it. Uh like my practice is really eclectic, or relatively eclectic, I should say. Like I draw a little bit from paganism, I draw a little bit from Luciferianism, like I draw a little bit from Kabbalah. But as far as the elementals go, let's see. Um, so what I would do is there's actually an elemental tool, um, like magicians' weapons or implements that relate to the elements. So like the pentacle or the coin relates to earth. So the entire time in the winter when I'm working with the earth elementals, I am like carrying that pentacle and like around, like when I'm in ceremony and when I'm doing my conjurations and stuff. When I'm working with air, like there's the athame or the dagger. And so like all of my rituals and ceremonies, like I'll be using my athame to like, like trace the sigils and to, carve the inscriptions into the air. Water deals with the chalice or a cup. So when I'm in ceremony and I'm working with the undines or the water elementals, like I'll have a chalice in my hand the whole time, and like I'll be doing invocations and stuff like that. And the wand deals with fire. So like all of my conjurations and stuff, I will actually use a wand for, which my wand currently is a rose stem that I used in my, I was actually formally initiated into an order, and they asked that I bring a rose with me, and that rose was used in the ceremony. And then when I got home, I dried that rose out and snipped the bud off of it, and I have actually got the actual bud from the rose right here on my altar. But the stem is actually a part of my wand, or it is my wand. So anytime I'm working with fire, all of my conjurations, all of my inscriptions are done with that wand. And the deeper you get into the connection with them, the more likely you are to have profound experiences. Like, um, I had a huge windfall of money working with the earth elementals out of nowhere. Um, Working with the air elementals, like, I've started, like, I've got this, like, list of fucking notes that just started coming out of nowhere when I started working with the fucking air elementals. Like I've got enough for probably like 3 or 4 books, just because I'll be working with the fucking air elementals, and like I'll start getting these ideas that like I don't feel like I ever would have gotten myself. It's like they're whispering in my ear. And to
Yeah.
me that's profound, because like where did that information come from? Like, did it come from deep within my psyche, or did it actually come from the elemental plane of air, and they're sharing their treasures with me that they've collected from other people throughout the years? Working with the water elementals, my intuition just became so much more deep. Like I was able to read tarot so much better once I started working with the water elementals. And the fire elementals, like I feel like there's an expression like, oh, you're cooking with gas now. Like once I started working with the fire elementals, I didn't need to spend nearly as much time in ceremony or in my like invocations and evocations. It's like that inner fire has just been like really beefed up. And like when I charge a spirit to do something now, like I don't have to do it over and over and over. Like I say, do this thing, and they do that thing now. And that's really profound to me. Like it has completely evolved my practice working with the elementals.
Okay. So, more on some practices that are not particularly from the dark side of spirituality. Talk
Mm-hmm.
to us about chakras.
Okay, yeah, we can talk about the chakras. Um, there is usually the 7 chakra system that goes from the root to the crown. Then there's like a 9 chakra system. There's like a 14 chakra system, but it's best to just start out with like the 7 or the 9. And I've actually got a meditation that I use in a lot of my consultations to help people better connect with those chakras. Um, and I could go over it briefly, and then if you like later, I can send you like a more in-depth version. But essentially, what you do is you connect with the root chakra, Muladhara, and you imagine and you actually feel the sensation where it's located, either at the base of the spine or the perineum. Um, and you actually imagine that you're inhaling like red orbs, tiny little red orbs of light into the sphere that is the Muladhara chakra in your etheric body. And you absorb that sense of security, knowing that the earth itself provides a sense of security for
Mhm.
you and all of those that you love. And well, I guess we're just going to go ahead and get into it. And then you move up into the Svadhisthana chakra, the second one, and you absorb orange energy from the moon. And you meditate on how transformative and creative the moon is. It shifts through phases. Sometimes it's white, sometimes it's, like an orange color, sometimes it does all kinds of different creative things. It shows us about how change is a part of creativity. And then you move up into the Manipura chakra, the third one, which is yellow. And this deals with your sense of power and centricity. And so you inhale the orange light from the sun. And if you notice, we're sort of ascending on the planes here. We've moved from the earth to the moon. Now we're at the sun. And so what you're doing is you're also increasing your frequency spiritually. You're actually raising your vibration by doing this meditation. And you absorb that yellow light from the sun into the Manipura chakra at the solar plexus. And you meditate on the power and the centricity of the sun and how everything revolves around it. And it keeps everything in that and centralized. And then you move up into Anahata, which is the heart chakra, and you meditate on the solar system itself, the entirety of the solar system, and its perfect harmony and balance. None of the planets bumping into each other. They're all doing their own things their own way, but they're doing it in unison and in harmony. And then you move to Vishuddha, the throat chakra, blue, and you imagine the galaxy and how much expression and voice exists in the entirety of the galaxy. And you breathe in that blue light and you absorb it and you integrate it in. And with any of these chakras, if you feel like you're getting too much of the energy, you can just allow the excess to seep out and go back to the source that it came from. And from the Vishuddha blue throat chakra and the galaxy, you move into Anya. You can use I use purple and indigo for Anya. And then I imagine the cosmos, the actual cosmos, all of the vision and intuition that exists in the entirety of the cosmos. And you breathe that indigo light into that sphere, and you feel the sensation of this revitalizing that center as you're raising your spiritual frequency up. And then you move from here into Sahasrara, which is the crown chakra, and I use white or a scintillating, like almost like a rainbow, um, almost like an oil slick. Like if you add water to oil, how you get that like really swirly, scintillating color. That's what I use here, and I imagine the universe, the oneness of everything. And I'm zooming out little by little as I'm doing this. And then I watch all of the galaxies, all of the cosmos come into one sphere. And to me, I end up in this place where it's just like there's 9 spheres that are white surrounded by or that are surrounding one central sphere. And for me, that's a representation of the universe, which is like all of the multiverses combined. And I just absorb that unity and that sense of oneness into that chakra. And once I feel full there, I will imagine, all of those orbs like disintegrating, and then I can see the multiverse or whatever, however you want to think about it. And then I come back down to the cosmos, and then I go back down to the galaxy, and then I go back to the solar system. And I'm sort of zooming back in on my body as I'm doing this, but I move from the cosmos to the galaxy, then I move from the galaxy to the solar system, and then I can see the sun within the solar system. I move down to the Manipura chakra, and then I, go to the moon, and then I go to the earth, and I come back to my physical body, and I allow myself to be grounded in the moment, knowing that I've raised my spiritual vibration overall, but I'm grounded and centered in this moment.
Okay, that sounds interesting. And talk to us about some spirits that are correlated to these chakras.
That is something that I might have to get into my notes for, but there is, I believe, in the Upanishads, if someone is really interested in this, there are specific deities that are attributed to these different chakra points. That isn't something that I can just pull off the top of my head. I wish I could, but like for instance, Shiva will relate to one of them. Lakshmi, like maybe Lakshmi would relate to the heart chakra. Maybe Shiva would relate to the throat chakra. Essentially, there are different god forms and frequencies that relate to these chakras, but without getting into my notes, it's not something that I can pull off my memory, unfortunately, though I
I
wish I
know,
could.
I know Ganesha is associated with the root chakra.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
But talk to us a little bit about maybe the demons with Michael W. Ford that you associate with them. And also
Okay.
maybe if you know of any angels or anything like that.
Yeah, I believe there's like Sumerian entities. So like not Manipura, Muladhara is related to Taramat or Taramati, which might be related to Tiamat. It sounds very similar. So Muladhara is Taramat, then Svadhisthana is Ashma, and then Manipura is Naungaithya, and then Anahata is Andar, and Vishuddha is Savar, Anya is Aquaman, and then Sahasra is Ariman. And since Ariman is here, I will also attribute the Earth Star chakra, which is like it's your feet. Essentially, it's Malkuth. It's where you vibrate from Malkuth when you're doing the middle pillar ritual. That I correlate to Azje, which is the consort of Ariman. It's almost like Samael and Lilith, but from a much more ancient perspective. And I will actually see those in their colors still. Like I start with black and then I go to red and then orange. So I still use those colors, but as I'm vibrating them, I like imagining that they're turning like a darker aspect of themselves. So like the red will turn maroon and so on and so forth.
Very interesting. You should consider putting together a book with all this information.
I'm definitely working on it. It's just taken way too long.
So talk to us a little bit about mistakes and setbacks and tips for beginners.
Yeah, that's great. Um, the biggest mistake that I made was jumping ahead. I could have saved myself years by just sticking to the fundamentals, like breath work. Like you might say, like yantra, mantra, tantra is like a really good basis. And what that is mantra is spells essentially. It's incantations, and the way that you can utilize this practically is like affirmations and stuff like that. And what this does is it allows you to stay focused, because a lot of times in this day and age, we live in a fast food drive through 30-second commercial society. And it's hard for a lot of us to focus on the things that we want for more than a day. So by creating these and reciting these mantra or these incantations or affirmations, it allows us to maintain our discipline. And then tantra is essentially energy control. It's like qigong. It's etheric manipulation, and what that does is it allows you to actually expand and empower your spiritual or your solar body. And then pranayama, breath work, and stuff like that. And yantra is it has a lot to do with visualization, more or less. So by working with these things for an extended period of time, anything you're going to learn later on, you're going to be able to utilize a lot more easily and a lot more efficiently. If you can't control your mind, it doesn't matter how many demons you know. It doesn't matter how strong your conjurations are if you're fucking thinking about Jerry Springer 30 seconds later. So I wish that I would have, or maybe I don't wish this because adversity is one of my focuses, one of my foci. Um, so fundamentals are really, really important. Don't move past the fundamentals. Um, if you move ahead, one of three things will generally happen. Either the shit won't make sense, you will not be able to use it properly. If it does make sense, you won't be as efficient with it. Or three, like it'll just straight wreck you. Like it'll turn your life upside down in the worst kind of way. And the way that you get past this is by focusing on the fundamentals, not jumping ahead and not assuming that you already know. So many times I would see a book and I'd be like, oh, yeah, herbalism. Like I already know about that. And so I missed out on an opportunity of learning something. Or, oh, yeah, like Goetia. Like I've worked with the Goetic spirits. I don't need to read that book, but you get different perspectives and you also remain humble and you can't grow if you think you're already the best. So maintaining a spirit of humility will constantly put you in a position of growth. Don't be afraid to ask questions. They always say like 98% of the time you're afraid to ask a question, like everyone else has that question as well. So don't be afraid to ask questions because all you're doing is stunting your growth. And don't be afraid to stick with the fundamentals. A lot of times you only need the fundamentals. If you like, if people had any idea how many of my clients or my students want me to teach them about like Goetia or the Shem angels or stuff like that, 98% of the time, all they needed in their life was either a sense of structure through asana and meditation and pranayama, or to just learn how to calm their mind, learn how to relax their body. If you're doing conjurations and you don't know how to control your mind, you're just going to make whatever the issue is worse.
Yeah. Um, I would say even the chakras is a good maybe starting point. That's where I started before I
Mhm.
started dealing with entities. And like looking back on it, I actually started it a little bit because I looked into black magic and they recommended to work on the chakras first.
Yeah, absolutely. You're drawing power through those centers.
Hmm.
So one, you want them to be balanced because you don't want to short circuit your working. And two, you're going to further empower your working by working with those power centers.
And also back on spending time, like extra time on a certain thing. When I first got into the chakras, I focused on the root chakra like for months and months.
That's good. I wish more people would do that. Or not, because then I'd have less clientele.
That's maybe something you could recommend to some people. I recommend it to people.
Definitely.
I have a
Yeah.
friend
And
that
and 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 anahata as well. People are like, oh, love and all that stuff. Anahata doesn't just deal with love, it deals with magnetism. If you're wanting to bring abundance and wealth into your life, like that's a really good center for that.
I agree, I agree. I actually have that tattooed also.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that you're aware of, there's no angels that are correlated to the chakras. Like maybe if
Well,
if we were to look into it, probably the archangels.
so yeah, you could attribute God names, archangels, angelic choir, all of these things, but it would be transitory through the system of Kabbalah. And
Mhm.
people are always debating whether or not you can attribute the chakras to the points on the tree. And people do it and it works for
I've
them. And
seen
I've done it.
some pictures of it.
Yeah, like it works. Like Vishuddha would relate to Da'at, Tiferet would relate to Anahata, Yasad would relate to Svadhisthana, Malkuth would relate to Muladhara. Um, you know, Manipura would relate to the conjunction of Hod and Netzach. Yeah, like you could definitely do it. The question is how much utility would you get out of it? If it's something that feels right, then do it. But don't go out of your way trying to cross wires that are in two different computers. You know what I mean?
For sure, for sure. And back to more pagan type deities. Are there any other ones that you're familiar with besides the Fae type?
So I worked a lot with Cernunnos or Cernunnos and Caridwen or Caridwen whenever I first started out. Because like when I was 13, I was initiated into like a Wiccan ideology or a Wiccan paradigm. So like they told me to pick a masculine deity, so I picked Cernunnos. And they told me to pick a feminine deity, so I picked Caridwen. I've actually got an effigy of Caridwen here. And so this is Arwen right here. This is the brew of inspiration. And so I really liked the idea of that because to me, like the mind and the skull are like a cauldron. You put things in there and you stir them up, and then you get something else that comes out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked a lot with Cernunnos and Caridwen. Cernunnos is like the horned god. He's the green man. He's like the thing that brings about the spring and all of this stuff. A lot of the pagan workings that I did were very mineral and herbally centered. Like it would be a lot of candle spells and like candle carving and like mixing herbs in, like making poppets and things like that. And I learned some curses and I learned some blessings, through that path. And one of my favorite things that I would do is to take clay and to create a poppet of somebody and mix in oils and herbs that had to related to, and this can be used for either way, but it was mostly for blessings, for me back in the day. Like if I wanted to bring about abundance to somebody, then I would mix like clove. I would get my mortar and pestle and I would grind up, and I still do this to some extent depending on the client. If they have a proclivity towards paganism, like I will take some modeling clay and I will make a poppet of them, and I will have them myself focused on them the whole time that I'm molding the clay, and I'm kneading the herbs and the crystals and the oils into that poppet. And then I will like essentially charge that as a talisman to bring them growth. If that makes sense.
Okay, that does make sense. Um, that was a question I was gonna ask.
You were asking about deities, pagan deities, and maybe how they related to the chakras. I'm not
No.
sure if that's where you were going.
Um. Mhm. Oh. These entities you just said right now, the two that you worked with, where
Hmm.
do they originate from?
So Cernunnos, I don't quite remember where they came from, but Ceridwen comes from the Mabinogion, which is a Welsh. It's a collection of Welsh tales, um, and there's actually a really interesting story that has to do with Ceridwen, where she was mixing up. She had two sons, and um, one of them was like sort of dark and one of them was sort of light. And there was this traveler that came, and she asked this traveler to stir this pot, this cauldron, while she went out and collected herbs to give to her son, whose name was Afagdu, and which I think means like ugliness or something like that. And for like months and seasons he was like stirring up this brew or whatever, and he fell asleep, and the cauldron bubbled over and one of the drops like spilled onto his hand, and it caused like a magical transformation in him. And when she came back, she was pissed because he let the brew spill over that was supposed to be for her son, and she had spent seasons collecting all these herbs. So she like chased after him or whatever, and like he turned into a rabbit, and then she turned into like a hawk, and then he jumped in the water and turned into a fish. And like these magical transformations just went around and around, kind of like in the Sword and the Stone. I think that's what that's based on. But eventually she gobbled this guy up and then gave birth to someone named Taliesin, which means bright browed. and it's just a really interesting story. But yeah, she comes from a Welsh collection of tales called the Mabinogion, and I think Cernunnos is just sort of an evolution of like Satan and Baphomet and all of these pagan male horned deities. And they just sort of, because like Wicca is a relatively young philosophy. I think like Gerald Gardner is attributed, I think, to like the modern day Wiccan movement. And that was only in like 1950. Like there's people that claim to come from Wiccan heritages that are centuries old, but it's like less than 100 years since its inception.
So, are there any books you would recommend for these type of workings? And so and also these beliefs you feel like are kind of recent. So
Mm-hmm.
do you think people like kind of created these deities like kind of like their own mythological thing? And do you think that's possible for people to do? Like if they're an occultist, if they desire to do that?
Not only do I think it's possible, I recommend it.
Okay.
I recommend creating your own pantheons once you have enough information. I recommend regularly studying multiple systems, study Buddhism, study Hinduism, study, you know, multiple systems and try to extract the commonality, the truth that's behind all of them. And you'll sort of rend the veil when you do that because a name is a trap in a lot of senses. Like if you think about ISIS, for instance, like what is attributed to ISIS is not nearly like everything that you could get with a name. Like you have to get behind the name. As far as books go, Jan Fries has this book called Seed. It's either called Sideways or Seedways. It depends on how you pronounce the word seether or scyther. Um, that's really good for getting in the mind. There's this book called Fire in the Head that's really good for like Celtic pagan mythologies. You could always read the Mabinogion. It was sort of based on like Arthurian, like King Arthur, Arthurian Welsh mythology. But it does seem to me that these are very recent developments compared to like Sumerian or Egyptian Cometian paradigms. But I don't think that takes away any of the power. And I'm by no means a an authority on Wiccan or pagan traditions, but um, I don't think that it takes away from the power of 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 the system when it's been made up recently. Like I've talked about this before, like there might have only been 4,000 people that ever worshipped a specific Sumerian deity, like Marduk or something like that, because the tribes were probably relatively small. But how many people know about Gandalf, today's day and age? How many people know about Ganondorf? Like millions and millions of people have charged these thought forms. So like I work with the Cthulhu mythos. Like I work with H.P. Lovecraft. I work with Dante for pathworking. I work with these systems that have been made up because when you are creating something, you're pulling from something in the unconscious mind or the
Yeah.
subconscious mind, which is the link to the divine in my experience.
So, what do you think about somebody making their own like mythological story, including deities, like how H.P. Lovecraft and Dante's Inferno is?
I recommend it. I think you learn more about yourself and I think you learn more about the world around you. And I've actually created like my own system of runes, for example, that I use in my magical workings. I've named them, I gave them, correspondent attributions and meanings and all of this stuff. And for me, when I started doing that, it was like I leveled up as a practitioner. One of the times I leveled up, I feel like leveled up as a practitioner was when I learned to connect the astral and the physical plane through the etheric body, through astral projection and proprioception and sensational awareness. And then another time I feel like I advanced as a practitioner was when I started making my own pantheons and my own symbols and my own incantations. It comes from a deeper place inside of you, and therefore it'll resonate back to a deeper place and create deeper changes within your psyche, in my experience.
Okay. So, how would you go about working with, let's say, the energy of something that's not necessarily a grimoire? Let's say
Like Lord of the Rings or something.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So Kabbalah is a great fucking system for that because it allows you to say, okay, so Saruman, like, where is he? Like on the tree. Well, he's probably not on the tree. He's probably in the Qlippoth. And so you go about and you say, okay, well, where does he fit on there? And you say, well, he might deal with Asmodeus, or he might deal with Talmael. And don't get held back if it feels like something exists in more than one sphere. That's okay. Um, but what you'll do is you'll try to compare it, or I recommend trying to compare it to something like Luke Skywalker, for instance, might be like the Christ figure of that story. And what you do is you figure out how it resonates with you, and you look at their physical appearance. You look at the challenges that they go through. You look at their abilities. You look at what their overall aim is in the storyline. And when you do that, it will allow you, you might say, oh, well, like, what's that fucking hairy thing? Chewbacca. Like, maybe that's like a Ganesha figure. You know what I mean? Like, try to find commonalities between other systems, or just see what resonates with you internally. And you might not have to make it that complicated. You might just really like the character of, what's his name, Aragorn in Lord of the Rings, and so you make him your patron. And what that might look like is maybe ordering a sword, or maybe learning how to forge a sword yourself, and forging together like his fucking sword or whatever, and make offerings to him. And what you're doing is you're resonating with that frequency internally and externally, and that can actually cause changes within your psyche. It's a form of chaos magic, essentially.
Okay. So go deeper into what chaos magic is, and also what we were describing right now is I've read it called pop magic, things like
I
that.
could see that. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Interesting.
also, are you familiar with servitor magic?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thought forms and egregores and servitors. That was very, very early in my career as a magician. So that's something that I hold very dear to me. As far as chaos magic goes, that's that might be the only kind of magic that I actually do, because I'm so eclectic. I'm relatively eclectic, I should say. And I use sigils for almost every single working that I do. Like, I've got a candle over there that's for a client right now, and there's a sigil carved into the candle, and there's correspondent herbs and oils that are placed into the sigil. And so to me, that's a form of chaos magic. And what I'm doing is I'm creating a thought form or a servitor by doing that to carry out my will. If you're wanting to get into chaos magic, you could read Liber Null or something like that, and look into the works of Austin Osman Spar. He did a lot for the movement of sigil craft and chaos magic.
Okay. Um, so
We can talk about maybe what the workings of a chaos magician might look like as opposed to a ceremonial magician.
okay.
So with ceremonial magic, it's very tedious and it's very structured, where like every single time you're going to ask for like abundance for somebody. Like, you're almost always going to work with either Saul or Jupiter, and you're almost always going to like charge a talisman, and you're going to light certain colored candles or whatever. Chaos magic is like, I'm going to work myself into a state of trance, and I'm going to either speak in some form of twilight, what I call like twilight language, or what's been called twilight language. And it's almost like talking in tongues, but there's more of a structure to it. Like, you have a certain rhythm and you have certain words that mean certain things. Like I've got words that I've channeled from being in altered states of consciousness via, like DMT or mushrooms, or just being in you know, a state playing the fucking didgeridoo. I can get into an altered state of consciousness. And what that looks like is it's a lot more wild and it's a lot more unstructured. Like some people will, like perform sexual acts to bring about the changes in their consciousness or their environment. Some people will just draw themselves becoming who they want themselves to be, and the act of doing that is charging that portrait as like a sort of talisman, and you're creating an egregor, a thought form in the astral and etheric planes. Chaos magic is a lot more wild, and it's a little bit more pioneering than ceremonial magic is.
Okay. I feel like I do chaos magic.
I feel like you probably do too.
Um, so talk to us more about your experience with servitors.
Servitors are interesting as fuck because people all the time, like I can't tell you how many times I get a client that thinks that they're hexed or thinks that they're cursed, and all it is it's an averse thought form that they've created that they're working against. So when you're creating a servitor, you have to be specific about your charge, about your statement of intent. And I always try to word it in a positive way. Like I had somebody the other day that said they charged their servitor with, don't let unattractive women be attracted to me that I'm not attracted to. And all of a sudden they're getting hit on by old ladies at the grocery store and all this stuff because they created a negative statement of intent. And the subconscious mind doesn't really recognize positive from negative. If you're focused on unattractive people, if you're focused on repelling unattractive people, you're focused on unattractive people. So one big piece of advice that I can give when you're charging a thought form or a servitor is to word your statement or your charge in a positive manner. So I told them they should have said, only let attractive people be attracted to me that I'm attracted to.
Okay.
And that has a much better effect. Another piece of advice that I can have, don't have too many servitors at a time, because sometimes either you're going to fucking drain yourself, or you're going to be so scatterbrained that you can't focus on anything, which is something that happened to me because I had like 8 fucking servitors going around. Or you're going to forget that you've charged them, and you're going to start having shit happen and you don't know why it's happening to you. But it's because you told yourself, for instance, somebody might have said a long time ago, I'm never going to grow up. And they might have told that to everybody. This is something I have experience with personally. I used to say I'm never gonna grow up. I'd be fucking hanging out with all my friends, and I mean it was like every day, I'm never gonna grow up. And then it got to the point where I was like, fucking 17, 18 years old, and I still felt like I was 11 years old. And I was having trouble adapting to society. And what I finally realized was I had created a servitor that was preventing me from maturing.
For
And
sure.
whether that was just a neural pathway in my brain, or whether it was an actual, metaphysical manifestation, or both, I don't fucking know. Like I don't pretend to know this shit. I just know that it works. I don't know how or why it works. I just know it does. So create positive statements of intent, even if it's for a negative cause. Try to word it positively. Um, don't have too many at once, and keep track of your servitors. And give them a name too. Give your servitor a name and create a sigil for it that you can burn. And like what I do is I erase the name on the sigil, or sorry, on the piece of paper. I erase the name as I'm banishing the servitor, and then I burn the sigil that relates to it. And for me, that constitutes an act of, resign of contract, essentially.
Okay. And let's say you create one. Have you ever drawn it out or anything
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah, yeah. Like you can draw it out or paint it out, or you can sculpt it. I don't draw as much as I used to, and I'm actually trying to get back into that because I think that drawing is such a powerful form of manifestation, especially if you can visualize something from your head and bring it down to the physical plane. Um, for me, I like to use clay. I'm a little bit better at sculpting than I am at painting or drawing. I took 3D art classes in in high school. So like stained glass and pottery and stuff like that. So for me, stuff like that works better for me personally. But yeah, the more ways that you can bring that thought form into physicality, write a song about it, or make a painting about it, or create a dance that's related. I don't know a lot about dance, but some people probably do. Create a dance that is specifically for that entity. And then maybe if you're ready to release that entity, maybe you perform the dance in reverse, or maybe you sing the song backwards, or maybe you burn the painting or whatever. But yeah, I definitely recommend doing that for sure. It's a good idea.
It's something I've looked into a lot but haven't got into yet, servitors.
It's one of the more simple. It's I shouldn't call it simple because it's simple to perform, but the complexities of why it works is by no means simple. So yeah, I guess one piece of advice is watch how much you're working with one side. Don't be afraid to be a left hand practitioner and work with angels or elementals. You create a greater sense of balance. If you're too left handed of a magician, you end up just being like a left pinky instead of a left hand. You're missing out on some of your power and some of your understanding. Um, don't be afraid to work with the chakras. That's a very powerful system. As far as servitors go, make sure that you keep track of them. Make sure that you're charging them with positive statements of intent, and like you suggested, draw them out, create a physical manifestation, and create it in a way that shows them bringing about the change already having occurred. Like if you want to be money, like picture or draw a painting of the servitor handing you the money, not like on its way to go get it. Because then the thing will just always be on the way to go get you your money and not actually bringing it to you.
Are there any books you can recommend on servitors?
Not personally, maybe. So Austin Osman Spar um, goes into the theory of chaos magic and why it works. I think that should be enough for most people. Um, Other than just defining what it means to you. If you can define what a servitor means to you, um, then that is going to help it a lot more. It's going to help it bring, your intention to you. Like I said, a lot of my career was solo practice, so I'm not as well read as I could be in other people's systems. I just am really experimental myself, and I know what works for me personally. I wish I could recommend some, but off the top of my head, I can't think of any right now.
All right, all right. Well, it was nice having you. We're about to run out of time, but all right, we'll have a
Okay.
part three soon.
Awesome, man. Take care. Thanks for having me.
Peace.